Okay, so carbohydrates are one of the four major biomolecules that we're going to talk about over the next few videos. And so this video is going to focus on carbohydrates. Okay, um, so what do you think of when you think about carbohydrates? Most of the time, people think of like bread or potatoes or French fries, things like that. Um, when you go exercise, it's a good idea to load up on carbohydrates. And so it's called carb loading. And so that's what we're talking about. And so, first, I want to tell you what carbohydrates are made of. And so, the monomers for carbohydrates are what we call simple sugars. And a simple sugar is a carbon based molecule. And it is also known as a monosaccharide, otherwise known as a monosaccharide. Okay, and there are different monosaccharides, and probably the most common monosaccharide that we're going to run into in this class is called glucose. So an example of one monosaccharide is called glucose. Okay, and glucose has this chemical formula. It has 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. And so what that means is that it is a 6 carbon molecule. And sometimes you see a glucose in a chain form. So the 6 carbons are in a chain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But sometimes the glucose molecules are found in a ring form. Okay, so sometimes this carbon will bind up to this carbon and it's going to form a ring. So it looks like this. And then there's a carbon that hangs off the end here. And we've got this thing going on here. And so it goes back and forth between a linear form and a ring form. Okay, and so I'm only drawing the carbons, but there are also oxygens and hydrogens attached to all this. Let me show you a picture of what one looks like. Okay, so here is what a glucose molecule looks like exactly. You are not expected to know this. All you need to know is that a molecule of glucose has 6 carbons in it. And so in this picture, I just want to point out that each corner represents a carbon. So let me put this in red. There's a carbon here, there's a carbon here, a carbon here, a carbon here, a carbon here, and then there's a carbon right here, which is written out. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons, and then there are some hydrogens. Here's 2 hydrogens and a hydrogen, and all these hydrogens here, and there are some oxygens, okay? And so all together, there are 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. Not all the hydrogens are written out here, but just trust me, that's what this molecule is made of. So glucose is the most basic configuration of a carbohydrate. It is a monomer, and so all these large carbohydrates are made of monomers, which are glucose molecules. Sometimes 2 monomers can get stuck together to make what we call a when 2 monomers are stuck together, it is called a disaccharide. So let me draw that just to show you an example. And so 2 monomers or 2 monosaccharides will stick together. Let's see, it's called a disaccharide. And an example of a disaccharide, so I'm going to say there's two monosaccharides. And so you have two monosaccharides, they come together through a dehydration reaction and make a disaccharide. And an example of this is sucrose. So sucrose is the sugar that you eat, like the sugar you add to your coffee every day is called sucrose. And what sucrose is one glucose and one fructose, which is another monosaccharide, and the fructose and the glucose come together to make sucrose. So let me draw that. So we have one glucose. I'm just going to draw it like this. So this is glucose plus another 6-carbon monosaccharide called fructose. They look very similar to each other. And when they stick together, you have these two monosaccharides bound together. And this happens through a dehydration reaction. And this is called sucrose. So this is what you eat all the time. And let me show you a picture of that. Okay, so here is a picture of fructose, and here's a picture of glucose. They both have 6 carbons, and they're both considered monosaccharides, and they can join together, and that's what makes us sucrose. Okay, so the last category that I want to introduce you to is called a polysaccharide. And a polysaccharide means more than two. More than two monosaccharides joined together. More than two, whoops, hang on. Let me clean that up. More than two monosaccharides joined together to make a very large polysaccharide. So poly means many. And I'm going to give you 3 examples of polysaccharides. The first example is going to be, it's called cellulose. Okay, and cellulose is a structural molecule that is found in plant cell walls. Okay, so I'm just going to write this down. Write this down with me. Found in plant cell walls. And what it is, it's used for a structural. It makes the cells of plants kind of rigid. Okay, plant cells are rigid. Our cells are not rigid. They're kind of soft. But plant cells have very rigid cell walls, and they are made of a lot of cellulose. And cellulose is long chains of glucose molecules. So I'm going to say found in plant cell walls, and it is made of long chains of glucose molecules. Okay, and so if you can imagine a glucose molecule being one of these rings, and then it joins to another glucose, and then that joins to another glucose. Okay, it's not that great of a drawing, but you get the idea. Many, many, many glucose molecules, thousands joined together. Okay, and this is what plant cell walls are made of. Okay, that's one example of a polysaccharide. The second one I want to introduce you to is called starch. I'm going to introduce 3 of these to you. So starch is also a long chain of glucose molecules. And what starch is, it's stored energy for plants. Okay, so starch is a long chain of glucose molecules. So all 3 of these are going to be long chains of glucose molecules. And this is stored energy for plants. Oops. Okay, and so it's long chains of glucose molecules, and the best example for starch are potatoes. So we always eat French fries, and so you know what starch tastes like. It's delicious. And so when a plant is making food, and we'll talk about this in future videos, um, it stores the food in the potato underground. And that potato is filled with these long chains of glucose molecules, which are called starch. And if the plant needs energy for all this different things like growing or making a flower or making a fruit or making new branches or whatever the plant needs to do, it's going to take some energy from the potato and use it. Okay, we like to take the potato and eat it because it's delicious and it's full of energy. Okay, so the plant is actually making it for itself, but we take it and we eat it. Um, so that's what starch is, long chains of glucose molecules. And then the last example I have is called glycogen. And glycogen is again a long chain of glucose molecules. Glycogen, it's a long chain of glucose molecules. And this is what animals use for stored energy. So stored energy for animals. Okay, so this is what happens when you carb load before your big marathon. What happens is you will eat something like a potato, which has starch, and you will take apart each of the glucose molecules, and then you will build a new chain of glucose molecules. And this is going to be stored energy that you hold inside your cells. So as you are running, you are going to need energy. And the way that your body does this is it's going to take off one glucose molecule and it's going to make some energy. Then it's going to take another glucose molecule, make some more energy. And it's going to keep taking glucose molecules as it needs energy. And so you want to have all these stored energy chains of glycogen ready to go. So it is very useful to carb load before you're going to go work out because you need your glycogen stores full so that you can use each glucose molecule to make energy. And we will talk about how that works later. Okay, so that's all I have for carbohydrates. Go eat some potatoes and carb load and then go for a great run. And I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.